Hello, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Joe McKendrick. I'm analyst and contributing editor at eBizQ, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. And the title of our webinar is Managing Business Transactions from the Enterprise to the Cloud and Back, sponsored by Amberpoint. And we have two excellent speakers for you today. And the first is someone who needs no introduction, and that is Dave Linthicum. Dave will be followed in today's presentation by Ed Horst, Vice President of Product Strategy at Amberpoint. Ed has been a frequent guest here at our eBizQ webcast. And in fact, Ed, we last teamed up at eBizQ's latest Cloud Camp, where we talked about the convergence of SOA and cloud computing.
In this slide, understanding the relationships, this is kind of how I see it. I think that enterprise architecture really kind of is a management discipline out there, and that everybody is concerned in how their governance is related to how they're going to control things, ultimately from a people and process standpoint, is related to the way which they're going to configure their architecture to align specifically to the business. Service-oriented architecture kind of emerged out of that. As an architectural discipline or a pattern of architecture, we're able to, as I mentioned earlier, break everything down to a functional primitive and build it back up again as services and able to bind those services and rebind those services into solutions. The value proposition of service-oriented architecture versus traditional architectural approaches is the ability to leverage or basically take advantage of agility, since we address everything as services and we're able to configure and reconfigure those services either in composite applications such as mashups or binding them into processes or extracting them into applications. The ability to re-abstract those systems and redefine those services and rebind those services into solutions over and over again to meet the changing needs of the business is the real value proposition of service-oriented architecture.
We're going to look primarily at the transaction side of the equation here, but it is part of a bigger task of how do you manage this overall distributed architecture. So there's an element of discovery and basic performance management, application management, things like that. And also security plays a role, and I'll cover that ever so briefly in here, but there's a whole area of policy enforcement in this distributed architecture that it can be a big challenge and something that needs proper management and governance. But I'm going to focus in on the second point here around the business transaction management aspects of this application in the picture that looks there. It's worthwhile pointing out and reminding everybody that kind of in this, when it comes to the enterprise relationship to the cloud, it can be kind of twofold. It can be the enterprise is a consumer of cloud services or may be, in fact, a provider of cloud services to their consumers.